Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM Channel 141. This is the Insight segment. I'm Harold Fisher. Tonight, a Medical Monday conversation about Alzheimer's disease and dementia and how difficult it can be for caretakers. My guests are Dr. Narissa Snyder-Dix. She is the daughter of Woodrow Snyder. Woodrow Snyder is suffering from Alzheimer's disease. And he went missing earlier this month, but thankfully he was found days later in a wooded area near his Temple Hills home in Prince George's County. Also joining us, Jillian Turner, Senior Research Coordinator with Howard University Hospital's Division of Geriatrics. Thank you both for joining this conversation. I really appreciate the time.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Sure thing. Let me first start with a few fast facts about Alzheimer's disease in the Black community, and this is according to the Center for Disease Control. Older Black adults are twice as likely as older white adults to develop Alzheimer's disease. The lifetime risk of developing dementia after age 65 is projected to be 38% for Black Americans, 30% for white Americans, and the number of Alzheimer's cases among Black Americans is predicted to increase fourfold by 2060. And Black patients with Alzheimer's are often diagnosed later and may need to present with more severe symptoms before receiving diagnosis compared to white patients. Before we get into some of the signs and symptoms and the like, I both want to get your thoughts about those numbers. Let me start with you, Ms. Turner. Your thoughts about those numbers in our community.
Well, based off, so I've been working in this field for over 8 years. For the most part, the general trajectory is that the number of cases is going to increase. Now, it may change over time. There are a couple of different factors that could be contributing to those increases in cases for Alzheimer's disease. One, we're living longer, right? So in some ways, one of the number one risk factors for developing Alzheimer's disease is older age. As you get older, you're more likely to be at risk of developing the disease. Now, that's not to say that it is normal for people to be forgetful. I'm sure we can all think of examples in our family of people who lived into their 90s, maybe into their hundreds, who seem to have memories like, an elephant, basically, like they didn't forget anything, versus you can have members of your family who are much younger who seem to be more likely or predisposed to having these diseases. So I'm not surprised by these numbers, at least based off of what we've seen. And the reality is, like, the brain is kind of like the final frontier in terms of diseases. It's hard for us to study it. It's hard for us to really test or figure out what's going on in it until problems arise. And then you have the issue of self-reporting for people. We don't know that there's a problem with your memory unless you say it. And unfortunately, when it comes to sometimes the response from a medical perspective, we might be more concerned about conditions that are more likely to harm you in the immediate short term versus memory sometimes may issues with memory. It then becomes about what's the concern for the patient. Is there someone in their life that's reporting that this is impacting them? So it then becomes about priorities, right, concerning your health.
Dr. Dix, you are a mental health professional, but still, even out of the personal, I'm sure these numbers are concerning for you. Your thoughts about those numbers that I shared.
Yeah. Well, my dissertation research was on the misdiagnosis of Black boys and men in America. And so, the stats resonate with me. There was one of the interviews that was done when my father was gone, and my younger sister said, we're not just data. People aren't just data. And I mean, this is a conversation that our family has had for a while. It was led by my father long ago. We understand that some of the research, I'm so glad that places like Howard University have research that is more geared to Black Americans, because we don't have as much research. When we were looking for my dad, one of the detectives kept mentioning this book called Lost Person Behavior. And he was talking to me about statistics and numbers and likelihood of people with dementia wandering off, going certain places. But all of the things that he talked about aren't applicable to my father specifically, and to some other cases that we've seen recently. So the underreporting is a huge thing. Ms. Turner just mentioned it. With us, we were looking at changes that were happening with my dad over a decade ago. And we were saying, hey, let's talk to the doctor. Let's try to get him into services. But that's because of my mental health background, wanting to do care coordination and wanting to have more eyes on him. We share liability, we share responsibility. That's what we talk about in the mental health world. So I was trying to approach it in that same way. But I really think that the underreporting is huge. And I think that caused a delay in us getting help at the early stages. Also, the denial and the pride. My father is a military man. He's taken care of a lot of things over the decades. And so when symptoms started to come up, like him going to the bank several times a week to ask for another password for his online account, at first we kind of waved it off like, what's going on with dad? Why can't he remember? But after, honestly, it took a couple of weeks for us to say, hold on, is this one of the things that happens? Mm-hmm. And I think we don't really understand as a community these numbers and some of the symptoms, and we're delayed in bringing attention to things sometimes. And also, just hoping for the best, that we can, delay the symptoms, avoid the symptoms, pray it away. But yeah, definitely. I love that you said the number one risk factor for this is age. And so really we all should be preparing for looking for symptoms, so that if we see it in other people, we may be able to say something, help them out, and really help with the underreporting.
Talk to us, if you can, about what happened with your father a couple of weeks ago. I would say that story was riveting, because it was in a lot of ways playing out in real time on local news. Certainly, it was something that I was not just following, but also as part of my job with WHUR News. We were also, this was part of of news reporting, and it became a really, really, really big deal. So what happened when your father, how did you know that he was gone? Kind of run us through the process, what happened.
Sure. So on the 11th of July, I was scheduled to watch my dad in the evening because my mom was taking a CPR class. And usually our daughter during her summer break was watching dad from 1 to 5. So I was watching him at 6 o'clock. That's the time that I arrived. I had my younger son with me, because usually my younger son is a distraction for my dad if he wants to go walking. He loves walking and minding the business of the neighborhood. That's what he loves to do. So I was on an advocacy call, and we were reviewing testing. When I look at the timestamp of the call, I got off of my call 6:53, 6:55, something like that. But I had heard my father walking. Literally, the steps going to the next floor is just 5 steps. I heard him walking, but I did not know that because my mom owns a childcare, she had turned down the chime on the door alarm, the thing that says front door.
Right.
So I was listening for front door. I heard him walking around, but since though walking around and front door didn't happen at the same time, I just thought he's walking. I'm getting ready to get off the phone. So I got off my call. He was walking around 6:50. I got off my call, went upstairs to his room, and his door was locked, which he never locks his bedroom door. So I was thinking he's upset because my mom left. She told him before she left where he goes. That's a something that we don't always agree on, our siblings and mom, because mom, she wants to live life like she's always lived life, which means telling dad everywhere she's going, what she's doing, being honest with him. And we're telling her, don't tell him so much. Because as soon as she left out the door, he was antsy. He just kept walking, asking, where is she? Where'd she go? How long is she going to be gone? She said something about some kids. So he was saying that he was looking for my mom.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what he was saying beforehand. That's why I had my son with me, so that we could entertain him. His door was locked. He wasn't answering, to the point that I went and got a screwdriver to jimmy his door open. Did that, and he wasn't there.
Okay.
By this time, he had probably a 7-minute head start on me. So I left out the door, up the street to the park where he was found. And I started trying to walk the trail, looking for him. My mom was still at her CPR class. So we started looking for him, my sister and I, in all the places where he usually goes. We didn't want to alarm my mom. By the time she got home, we had already called the police. I got there about 6, I said. She got home around 9, and he had been gone since 6:50.
Mm-hmm.
So they issued a silver alert that night because we couldn't find him in any of the places he usually goes. My mom was insistent that they needed to go into the woods with the dogs. So they did helicopters, they did bloodhounds, they did all types of stuff that night. And the next morning, because this was the 5th silver alert they had to issue, the next morning the detectives told us somebody else was missing in the Eastern Shore. So they were moving their resources there. And they said, really for my father, because he would show up with these silver alerts. He'd just come walking out the woods sometimes. They said, we just have to wait for him to show up or somebody to bring him. They referenced that book, The Lost Person Behavior. The chances of him going this place are this percentage. The chance of him getting on the bus. They thought he got on the bus. And we were telling them, all these different factors as a family.
That he wasn't there. Yeah.
We know he wasn't doing that.
So let me ask you this. After the disappearance, and it was 4 or 5 days that he was gone.
So he left Friday evening. He was found Tuesday evening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Yeah. What condition was he in? We know that he was found in the woods, and we know it was a very emotional thing for the family, and I'm sure everyone. I mean, this was like a made-for-TV drama almost. the relief of finding him, alive and under those circumstances in pretty good condition, considering that he was gone for 4 days. What did he say when you talked to him?
When he saw us, he kept saying, "That's my wife. That's my wife." When my mom came around the corner. When he saw my younger sister, he said, "Baby girl." So he recognized her. And he answered to his name when we were saying Dad, Woodrow. He answered to Dad. And he really wasn't saying much else. Oh, he did tell us not to worry because we were just crying and sobbing all over him. But he said, don't worry. You all are too beautiful to be crying. Those are the things he said. But when we, asked him questions about why or what happened or anything like that, sometimes, like if he caught a news story in the hospital, it seems like it would, I don't know if it was jogging something. I don't think that that's the correct term in talking about his recollection. But, he would say things that sound familiar. And even one story that I recorded, somebody called in a tip and said that they thought they saw him with a dog. And when he was talking in the hospital, his stories were all over the place. But he started talking about this dog that he found in the woods, but it wasn't his. So we really don't. That's one of the things with being a caregiver, a family member. Sometimes we don't know what's reality and what's not, or what's a piece of his reality.
Hold that point, because I've got to take a break, and I want to hear Ms. Turner's thoughts about what you've already shared. I have so many questions, and we're so glad that your father is in good condition under the circumstances. So please stay with us. We want to remind you that you can hear this and every edition of the Daily Drum Insight segment via podcast on WHUR.com. The original Quiet Storm with Raheem Devon is next on WHUR. This conversation continues on Sirius XM, channel 141 and 96.3 HD2 in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We continue our Medical Monday conversation about Alzheimer's disease and dementia. My guests are Dr. Narissa Snyder-Dix. She is the daughter of Woodrow Snyder. He has Alzheimer's disease, and you may have heard that he was found in the woods near his Temple Hills home after wandering away for 4 days. Also joining this conversation is Jillian Turner, Senior Research Coordinator with Howard University Hospital's Division of Geriatrics. Ms. Turner, before the break, we were hearing from Dr. Dix about this incident that happened with her father, and during the course of that, you were kind of nodding your head. What were you thinking as you were listening to her tell the story about what happened?
So what struck me in particular is his desire to look for his wife. A lot of people who have been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, because they're becoming more and more forgetful, they cling to the people who they recognize the most. So his wife obviously is someone who's with him most of the time. And when he couldn't find her, he was basically, in order to kind of help him to feel calm and relaxed and kind of reassured of where he was, he decided to basically utilize his agency and his ability and go look for her. And so that ultimately led to his ability to, because it's really only when people are more advanced in the disease that they really have a hard time using commonly used tools, feeding themselves, opening jars or opening doors. So he's definitely still able to do some things, and he may present to people as if he's normal. It's just that when a person who knows him, or if you ask a person about, what they're able to recall about maybe a movie or a note, they might not be able to articulate what it is that they saw or learned or that kind of thing. And so that struck me, because sometimes you can have people who will change their mood as a result of they'll feel anxious from being separated from those loved ones. And so, and certainly it's wonderful that he was able to, was found in good state. You would be surprised though, because the parts of our brain that are in charge of kind of like all of the things that are necessary for us to survive, they're stored in different parts of the brain than those that we use for like logic or problem solving. And so when you're thinking about different symptoms to look out for, right? That can be something that you notice in terms of how she mentioned earlier on. They noticed how her dad was having trouble remembering passwords. Now, obviously, passwords, all of the requirements now that you need to have in order to remember, it can be challenging for everyone. But sometimes for people who are having memory issues, they can't do the problem solving steps, like breaking out, like, what do I need to do to get into my account, sort of thing. And so it's one of those things where, because we're not aware of what the symptoms are as a general public, we can't always recognize when somebody might be in need and struggling with kind of feeling lost. And it's one of the things that can be sometimes challenging. What I usually share with other people is that someone with Alzheimer's disease has a little bit more similarities to a young child. In the sense that, they don't always understand like explanations if you don't break it down to them. They're driven a little bit more by impulse in terms of regulation. You have to remind them of multiple things time and time again, even when you told them something before. The difference is that for people with dementia and Alzheimer's disease is that there's a part of them that recognizes that I should be able to do this.
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
I was like, I should be able to do these things. And so there's a emotional component to it that can be very, I guess, unsaddening to them, because, and that's possibly why people who do have memory issues are very hesitant to seek help, because it's kind of like, once I realize that there's a problem and I acknowledge there's a problem, I don't know if if this is going to go away, right? And it's
if I may, Ms. Turner, before I go back to Dr. Diggs, we often hear the terms Alzheimer's and dementia used interchangeably. What is the difference between the two, if there is one?
So the way I usually describe the difference is dementia is basically just memory loss that impacts your ability to live your day-to-day life, right? There are different symptoms that you can see, and usually we can recognize right away when someone's having a memory loss issue, right? We just don't know what causes it. And so when you're thinking about Alzheimer's disease, it's a particular disease that has dementia, basically a medical symptom of where you're having trouble with memory. But it's not the only disease that has dementia. Okay. There are several different types of diseases that have dementia. So you have vascular dementia, someone who had like a severe stroke or brain hemorrhaging, they can experience memory loss as a result of that. You can have Lewy bodies dementia, frontal temporal lobe dementia, sometimes Parkinson's, and what we're finding out is even Down syndrome individuals can have memory loss or dementia. So it really just depends. Unfortunately, you're not going to know what the cause is or how to appropriately treat the dementia unless you speak with your doctor and get evaluated for what is causing it.
Okay, thank you for that. Dr. Diggs, one of the things that you were talking about earlier in this conversation, and I was particularly struck by it, was the structure that you and the family had come up with prior to your father's disappearance, where one member of the family was watching for 3 or 4 hours, and then you're coming in so that your mother can do this, but you made sure that your son was there. And how did you come up with that plan, number one, and have you made any adjustments in the wake of this dramatic incident with your father?
Yes. So I came up with that plan, again, reaching into my care coordination for mental health, but I reached out to the village. Now, who's the village? And not my village, but who is in my mother's village? Who's in my dad's village that can help? So we have siblings. My mom is a part of a congregation. So I reached out last year to over 20 people to say, hey, can we get an hour of your time on rotation, please, to try to help us with Dad? What we ended up doing was my sister and I watching him Monday through Wednesday from 1 to 5. And then we had 2 different brothers from my mom's congregation watching him on Thursday and Friday at the same time. We did that because he has just observing his behavior. Oftentimes after lunchtime is when he wanted to walk. In the morning, my mom kind of had more control over him agreeing to sit down and eat, or, him not feeling like she's really trying to hold him back. Part of the issue was that my mother has been running a childcare for the last 30 years. So he's home. She has a childcare. She's tending to her childcare. When he wanted to leave out around lunchtime, the kids are transitioning to a nap. She has no help, and he would just leave. So she would start calling us, my husband, my sister, myself, and we have jobs. I run a private practice, and we really started to see how bad it was getting because of how often she was calling us. And then we found out she wasn't even calling us every time. Sometimes she would call a friend to come, a substitute to come and watch the daycare, and she would go looking for him. So when we really started looking at the number of incidents and then, her life and her livelihood, that's how we really came up with that plan. We had to keep reevaluating it though, because we know that my dad has certain things that he prefers prior to dementia. Just as an example, men wouldn't come in the house by themselves and just socialize with mom. But if somebody's coming to check on him, a guy who he might know from the congregation, some days his mind might say he doesn't know that person. And this is just a man coming to see his wife.
Oh,
so
dear.
My younger sister and I really had to put our heads together, switch our schedules around to try to decrease really problems that were occurring, because we're just trying to run a business, or we're just trying to have somebody come sit with you. It's the preparation that goes into this. I love that you said earlier, Ms. Turner, they're infantile-like sometimes, they're childlike. And so with your children, with my children, I like to be extra with plans. I like to vet people. I need to know that they understand my child's language. And that's the same type of thing that we had to come up with Dad. Who understands his language? Who understands, these symptoms of dementia that we're seeing? What does that mean? Sometimes people would hang out with him, and I'm saying the two brothers that we were paying. One brother took him to a store that my dad loves, and my dad went inside, he shopped. By the time they got to the parking lot, my father said, "Don't get on my bad side, young man," and refused to get in the car with them. He was walking up a hill trying to get into traffic to get away from this young man who he adores.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to recognize he adores him on certain days. And it's minute by minute. It's not even day by day. And then trying to reason with him doesn't always work. So putting together that structured plan was not just about hours. It was about personality, patience, understanding. Are you willing to walk a mile or two if that's what he's willing to do? We really had to find people that understand it. And my father's a cultured man. He's well-traveled. He knows several languages. So, sometimes it really does come up that he feels like we're trying to treat him like he's unintelligent. And so sometimes reasoning with him just doesn't work. So we had to really interview and vet the people on that structured team for him.
I will say in full transparency that, Dr. Dix, your situation reminds me so much of my father's situation. I lost my dad in 2022, but and this is kind of a sidebar issue, because he had already been exhibiting some signs of dementia, some memory loss and what have you. And I think the big incident, and very much like your father, Dr. Dix, my father was a military officer. He was a union executive, highly intelligent, very cultured, well-read, strong personality. And to be able to watch this deterioration of some of the things that you've always known so well about him. And on this particular day, this was in October of 2019, where he was going to drive his Cadillac from the house in Brookland near Catholic University to Jerry's Seafood in Bowie to pick up some food, and I said, gosh, and I said it was 22. No, it was in 21 actually. See, memory is something for all of us, right? So, but be that as it may, he left the house at 11 o'clock in the morning, and Jerry's, what is that, a 90-minute, all the way out there and come back.
Yeah.
He disappeared. And he was not found until 10 o'clock that night via OnStar and the help of the DC police at Benning Road and Minnesota Avenue. But he had driven all the way out to Annapolis because he said Jerry's had been moved and they had changed the roads and had encountered a state police officer. And at that time he was quite lucid, but he didn't have his cell phone. It never occurred to him to stop somewhere and try to call home, which would be all of the things that he would have suggested to us as younger people. And he did make it back. His car was damaged, nobody was hurt, but he did make it back. And when he came into the house, and this was one of the most amazing things, there were about 10 police officers in the house, some in uniform and others plain clothes. And he came in and he looked around and he said, "Well, hello, everyone. Is there a party that you all didn't tell me about?" He had no recognition of the fact that there were police officers in the house. He thought it was a party. And it was on that day that we took his keys from him. And so it's very, very much, Dr. Dix, like what you were describing. And it's very, very difficult, Ms. Turner, for a lot of families to really navigate how this deterioration can happen for people who weeks or months or years ago were just sharp as a tack. So, but the thing that I also wanted to talk about, we often hear about early onset dementia or early onset Alzheimer's, and I wanted to kind of talk about the facts of that. What is considered, Ms. Turner, early onset? How young are we talking about?
So usually with early onset, we're thinking about people who develop dementia in their 40s, possibly their 50s. It's basically anyone who does not have an AARP card, and you're having memory issues. That's considered more early onset. Versus, generally speaking, when we're thinking about Alzheimer's disease, usually on average, it's about like the age is like 65 to 67. So your mid 60s, that you're on average more likely to see people start to develop those symptoms or be diagnosed. The reality is that the changes that happen in our brains occur much earlier than the symptoms of dementia that you'll see. And so from some of the research studies that have been done, like certainly the Alzheimer's Disease Neuroimaging Initiative, the ADNI study, we found that up to like 10, maybe even 20 years before we start to see changes in memory, you can see these changes in the brain, or these formation of what we call amyloid plaques. And even now there's a new protein that we are studying that causes neurofibrillary tangles or tau tangles. And so the presence of these two structures, basically, they prevent the brain cells from talking to each other. And similar to our basically body thinks that, like, well, if these brain cells are not talking, they can't get the nutrients that they need, we don't need these cells anymore. And so the more brain cells that die in your brain, the more tissue and brain destruction happens as a result of the disease. But it is a relatively slow process. And so it can happen over decades, basically, before it really starts to impact people.
Can you talk to me, Dr. Dix, about how was he doing now? It's been about a week or so physically, Because again, your father was outside for 4 days. It has been hot, it has been raining, and I think that would suggest that physically he was in very, very good condition when he disappeared. But how is he doing now physically, now that he's been in the hospital and has a chance to physically recover?
Yeah. He's actually doing very well. He's having a slow time with walking, but he's walking by himself. He's eating something that Ms. Turner mentioned earlier. I know that sometimes my dad doesn't know if he's hungry. He doesn't know if he's tired. It kind of becomes a feeling according to the son, but he doesn't consciously know I'm hungry. And I do think that probably was helpful for him while he was out, just just continuing to walk, continuing to move, not thinking that he was hungry or too hot. And now he's doing well. I can tell that his mood is different than it was prior to.
What do you mean?
So sometimes you can tell he wants to remember, or he sees or feels something that feels familiar, but he can't. Sometimes he's like, I can't, like this doesn't this. My father,
It doesn't come together for
yeah,
him.
yeah. And my father had both of his parents were hard of hearing, so he's fluent in sign language, and you'll see him sometimes when he can't get the word, he does the word
He'll
with his.
sign it.
Yeah, and
Wow.
that is remarkable to me, but I don't even think it's Miss Turner, I don't think it's like a conscious thought. I think it's like maybe just habit, muscle memory that he's doing.
Yeah.
But even that is decreasing.
Yeah, because you think about the skills that we learn when we were younger, like even going to the example of like learning to feed ourselves. Like there are certain things that are very impactful. So like if you're a musician and like you've learned to play this musical guitar, for example, at a young age, you'll find that people are able to retain those skills even when they're diagnosed. And then to your point about the changes in terms of their mood, it's very true that in some ways it's easy for us to, even as people, confuse the signs and symptoms of when we're dehydrated versus when we're hungry. But for people with Alzheimer's disease, again, they're losing track of time. They really cannot figure out or maintain when things happen in a sequential order, right?
Yeah.
And so to the extent that your father is able to even keep track of like, oh, it's daytime versus nighttime, there are people who experience what we call sundowning, who have Alzheimer's disease.
What is that? Yeah, help me with that. Go ahead.
So it's generally speaking, sundowning is when you start to experience issues with or changes in a person's mood or behavior as a result of the impact of the disease impacting their circadian rhythm. So they are having trouble keeping track of the day, and and their body is not able to kind of regulate, kind of like this is night, this is daytime, so to speak. And so you can have mood changes where some people will get more agitated towards the evening and more aggressive in terms of their behavior. But it doesn't always happen for all people. So it's unfortunately, there's no one size fits all. Each person is going to be different when they're experiencing this disease. And one of the things that we've noted, at least at our site, that to a certain extent, what you do professionally in education may seem to have a kind of protective effect in terms of you experiencing symptoms at later ages or older ages. But when you do start to experience the symptoms, like, all the strategies that you put into place from like, I have a calendar to keep track of the date and time, or you'll see some people who suffer with the disease who take like sticky pads or notes, and they have instructions either by loved ones on what to do and concerning like day-to-day activities. There does come a point where it's just like their brain starts to be like we can't process this, or we can't hold all this information together. So they kind of let it go. And so it's one of the things, though, that is important to keep people engaged, right? Even when they do have this diagnosis, because, you know, everyone still needs love. Everyone still needs to interact with them. So I think it's great that you have people, Dr. Dix, as a part of your dad and your mom's tribe to try to engage them, because that's important. There are things that we get from just interacting with other people. And it's like we've all played different roles in our life. We've all had different experiences. And when your day changes from every hour and every minute, basically, when you have this disease, it's like you need all of the support and all of the ways that people can connect with you, just to kind of identify where you are.
Dr. Dix, I only have a couple of minutes left, but I did want you to have the last word. What advice would you give to families who are just beginning to see some of these issues pop up based on your experience in your family with your father?
Sure. On my website's Nurturing Possibilities, LLC.com. On my website, we do have a checklist for caregivers, just an introductory checklist of things as you're getting a support team together. And then really, as a mental health professional, my advice would be for people to really rectify where they are as far as attachments with their loved one, resentment, love, because having those feelings when trying to take care of somebody can be tough. And, you know, also understanding what dementia looks like. I saw it a lot, you know, with my siblings and family members the last couple of weeks. We've been telling people that dad's deteriorating, but if you talk to him on the phone for 2 or 3 minutes, sometimes that could hold somebody over for a couple of years if they think he's okay. But now that it's gotten to this point, there are so many friends and family that are said to us, we wish we had come sooner. We didn't know it was this bad. I didn't know that he got so bad so quickly. You know, and I've really had to take my time a couple of years ago and grieve the man that I was best friends with, that I had conflict with, and then went back to being best friends with. He was the inspiration for my dissertation. And so losing that person, it does take a grieving process that I don't think a lot of people in our community are ready for. And understanding that them not recognizing you doesn't determine how much they loved you. They just really can't recognize you, a house, a thing. So definitely I would say take care of your mental health. I'm a therapist, a licensed therapist. We have therapists that work in my practice. So again, Nurturing Possibilities, LLC. If you want to go to the website, we have resources there. And continue to look for resources. I don't know of a lot of resources that can help my dad yet, but I'm hopeful that by us being vocal about what we need, whether it's the VA, a community resource, or whatever the case is, we can really build those resource knowledge bases for people like us. And we hope that more and more people have positive outcomes with their family members leaving. I said we need to start looking at aging people that we see on the street walking like a toddler that's just walking, and just check in and see if they're okay, because everybody does not have the positive outcome that my family had with dad being gone for a couple days.
I'm going to have that be the last word, but I want to thank both of you. Jillian Turner with Howard University Hospital. Thank you so much for making yourself available. Also, Dr. Narissa Snyder-Dix, the best to your father and you and your family as you continue to navigate this. And we are so glad that he was found alive. So thank you so very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
That is the Daily Drum for this Monday, July 28th. I'm Harold Fisher. Good night.